And today, let's go with something more practical, something practical for me,
Mm-hmm.
something practical for people who are walking out into the abyss, who are letting go of familiarity, of old patterns, of a diminished identity. And what I am alluding to is the abundance mentality. Hear a lot of talk about abundance and abundance mindset. What is the abundance mentality to you, Jonathan, versus a scarcity mentality, which is the mentality of someone who is diminished and limited?
Wow. First of all, I didn't expect the subject that we cover to apply so heavily to the whole thing that we've been sharing as the message. Because to me, the abundance mindset, a lot of people think, oh, it's wealth, money, family, fulfillment, prosperity, so many different names. But I noticed that most of the abundance mindset is geared towards money because people feel particularly challenged in that area. So they have to really hone in on it, focus in on it, and make sure that it works out. But I noticed that even just this message, a lot of the stuff we've been sharing so far is the abundance mindset. And it goes back to the interview we just did just last time, when you shared some of your breath work and your journey and your perspective. To me, abundance mindset is financial as well, but it's also having good food to eat, good company, joy, laughter, a wonderful home life, maybe even a good, profound, expressive social life, friend group. But to me, it goes even further than that. And I find it interesting that I get the chance to share the stuff that we talked about last time, about, doing a past life and remembering your divinity or your power, your inner strength, and who you really, really are in the more of the, in the celestial framework. Because to me, abundance is about all of that. It's about remembering who you are, really knowing it inside, really embracing it and really embodying it. And I think you said that last time. You were a little, it's hard to figure out how to remember who you are, but then embody it inside of a physical body. It gets to be very challenging. And I think for me, I think my whole mindset is trying to share a mindset of more abundance in all areas of our life, whether it's spiritual, it's financial, friendships, because to really know who, from whence you came, that is abundance. Because instead of feeling like just a human who goes to work, who pays taxes, who's worried about their kids and their family, to knowing who you really are and embracing that as your true identity, and then anchoring that down into the physical. Now, to me, that's the highest form of abundance, because through the process of embracing your divine aspect or who you really are, that's when things really start to line up and become truly abundant, because you're living from a place of divinity and you're living from a place of your own personal power. If you can live from a place of personal power, that means you're somewhat familiar with and empowered by who you really are, your real nature. And I noticed that happened to you in the breath work we did. You felt you were full of all that you were. You were full of all the expressions of yourself, and it made you abundant in your beingness. So for me, abundance is more about a mindset that then leads to knowing the full capacity of what you really are. If people knew their full capacity, they'd sure as hell be done asking me for advice or for anything. And they'd be done praying. There'd be a lot of things that would become obsolete if people reached the highest form of abundance, which is to know thyself. Because if you know thyself, you naturally are in a greater alignment with your higher self, like people like to call it, your spirit self, your angelic self, your celestial self, whatever particular titles people like to put on it, or just being more in alignment with Source. So if you're in alignment with Source, you'll be able to live in alignment more easily, and things will gravitate towards you. Things will grow in your presence. Things will become more just by you being there. People will feel more loved by you being in relationship with them. People would feel more fulfilled and abundant themselves, so you'd start to grow abundance around you. So, what I saw you do last week in the breath work, that to me was a huge expression of abundance, because you were seeing Jason in a different perspective, in your more angelic or higher perspective. And if you can merge your human beingness to your higher expression of who you are, your source or your God aspect, whatever people like, then things really become abundant, because even death flees from you when you know that you're a divine angel, because it's not real anymore. You know that all things of lack and limitation and suffering and things, they start to disappear in the light of who you really are. So that's kind of what I think of as abundance. I don't really think of it in the financial point of view. I think of it as, if I'm embodying me, all the things I need will come.
Yeah, that brought out a few ideas for me. So what you're speaking is basically ancient wisdom from mystery schools, from secret societies. Rudolf Steiner gets a lot of talk these days, and he was a Rosicrucian, a theosophist, and then he developed his own system, which is anthroposophy. And one of his concepts is that there are two beings that humanity deals with. You have Ahriman, who we talked to, and Ahriman is the materialism, the density. So much of what you mentioned that most people associate with abundance, the money, the status, the sex, this is very Ahrimanic. It's very much of the material world. And then the other aspect is Lucifer, and Lucifer is more of a spiritual nature of this is all a simulation, and your truth is this light that's outside of this. But the call again is to integrate Lucifer and Ahriman, bring them into the center, and then Steiner calls this the Christ spirit awakening, when Lucifer, when the spirit is embodied. So Lucifer and Ahriman are embodied in the human and meet in the middle. The Christ spirit awakens, and the way you described abundance sounds very similar to that.
Yeah, that's exactly, I guess, what I was trying to say is exactly that. Not knowing, I don't know anything about Steiner's teachings or principles, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to convey, is the merging of the two, the marriage. People talk about in the New Testament, they're talking about the wedding of the bride, and they call it the church and all these different things, but that's not really what it is. It's actually the marriage between the higher and the lower. It's the marriage between the spirit and the flesh. It's the union of the masculine and feminine, and that's exactly what it sounds like Steiner is trying to articulate.
Yes, and we're kind of going, we've spoken about this in previous videos, the difference between the divine voice versus our ego.
Oh, yeah.
And so the ego can get actually caught up. Most people think of the ego getting caught up in the Ahrimanic traps, which is of money and status and power. But the ego can also get caught up in Lucifer, like with the spiritual arrogance too, feeling that you're better because you understand you're into all the spirituality. And again, true abundance and true embodiment is when you're living from that divine nature and the divine calling, which you would radiate a certain kind of energy. You simply are just going to show up a certain way in the world that is where I guess you would just, best way of saying it is, because you are what you are, you're able to give your gift freely, openly, the gift of your soul, what you're here to offer, and then what you need to do that just comes because of the energy you're putting out that you're connected to.
Yeah, it's the divine alignment. I was just sharing that with friends this morning. That divine alignment is all that's required, because the divine, you are divine. So if you're divine, then that means you have a divine purpose. If you have a divine purpose, then that means it's already written in your DNA. So all that's left for you to do is surrender and be an active participant in the divine will that's already inside of you. It's like a seed. People, if you plant a seed in the ground and pour water on it and cover it with soil, it doesn't have to try to grow. It just needs a little sunlight, some water, and soil, and then the rest is part of its divine blueprint. It just starts to unfold. And the thing about people is they have the ego mind that thinks it knows what to do and how to control everything. And then the other mind, the divine mind, knows the blueprint. It knows what you are and what you need in order to fulfill your purpose. So very often in two diverging paths, but like you said, sometimes the very harmonic energy can attach to the other and then try to use that for its own means and try to control that as well. The thing I have found is it's in the middle. It's in that center point. It's like if you have a merry-go-round, you get in the middle, there's no more turmoil. As soon as you find the center of it, or the center of a tornado, there's no more push-pull, there's no more force. And so that's what I imagine it as always, because if you're always trying to reach higher for the spiritual realms and go out of body and astral project and lucid dream and do drugs.
Luciferian.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you're always doing that, make no mistake, being angelic can be just as problematic and cause just as much harm to you as the other, as being too rigid, too cold, too dominating, too mathematical, too left brain all the time. You can get so much one way or the other that you completely lose who you are. And that's, to me, true abundance isn't left or right or higher or lower. It's the very middle. It's the center. And the center is where you find your equilibrium. And once you find equilibrium, the divine creation that's all around you naturally sends everything you need your way in order to develop. Just like a seed. I mean, think of how many trees there are in the world that have never had any help or cooperation or never had an agenda or a plan. They just were planted. That's all that was required. And next thing you know, there's this giant oak tree standing there. No one made it do that. So who's in control? Is it really the ego, or is it the divine itself? Because to me, when I talk, I think a lot of people think too that the divine that I'm speaking of is the angelic realm, and that isn't it either. I'm not talking about my higher self. I'm talking about there's my higher self, there's my lower self, which is the human form, but there's a middle that is the divine or God, or, and I don't even call it spirit, because spirit's still part of the higher realms. The spirit is part of the angelic realms. I'm actually referring to the singularity or the middle path. God, that's where mother and father reside, is in that singularity, in the source, the center of all creation. That's where they hold axis. And the axis that they hold is also within each and every individual person. So to me, the journey towards God is simply a journey towards the center of oneself, to find that center point and then do your best to stay in it for the rest of your journey. That's my interpretation.
So you referred to, again, this powerful breath work that you did with me and what you saw in me, and that vision again of this angelic being sprouting wings of fire, becoming this being of fire. And again, I'm pretty fresh off of that.
Yeah,
That's been just a week since I've done that.
Week, yeah.
And I got a sense of the truth of who I am and my divine nature. But what I've found going through the week, there have been plenty of challenges that have really made it hard for me to remember that and believe that.
Yeah.
So what practical advice, you can just talk to me, but for someone else, I'm sure has gone through that, they've had a taste, they may have gone to a plant medicine ceremony or breath work, or just had their own transcendental experience where they got to feel the truth of who they are, and yet they haven't spend enough time in this new identity, so they still have some of the old habits and the old nature that are still pulling on them, what advice would you give to someone who is shifting into more of this divine alignment, but isn't there yet? That's not their natural state. That's not where they haven't been there long enough. They got a taste of it.
I think that in your case and in anyone's case that's in that similar position is just complete trusting and not trying to regain it or retreat from it. Just it's that loose, like we spoke in another video previous, is just that relaxation. Just know that when it comes up and it shows you your true form and the beauty and the wonder and the magnitude of who you really are, let that be enough. And then it will gradually, with just a loose grip, just let it be. And then when the time is right and you're ready, it's kind of like your spirit's trying to... It's like your spirit and your ego are trying to learn to dance.
Oh, yeah. So I'll share this. So what I've found is I have a greater awareness of my true nature and what is right for me. And I still am getting some... I did a cord cutting, but some of those voices are still very loud, very present with me. But I haven't yielded to them. I've made different decisions, but it's really, it's been a lot of willpower for me to do that. But what I can say is there has been a greater awareness of when I'm in my real self and when I'm not. And I remember we went to dinner after the breath work, and your wife asked me, Jason, are you able to tell when it's your real voice or when it's the false voice or the ego? And I can. And so I've been able to successfully listen to my real voice, but that other voice has still been super loud because it's, again, there hasn't been enough time that's passed yet.
Yeah, what I notice is it's kind of a path that I've seen happen with individuals. I remember my own. At first it was so brutal, I was just getting tossed about, beaten up, didn't know what was going on. Life was traumatic and painful, had no idea. But then as I started getting glimpses of my divinity, I started noticing that the voice would get louder. And you remember right before you breathe, you did that breath work. Remember how powerful it was?
So which voice are you referring to? The divine voice or the negative voice?
The negative voice.
Yes.
Because when you...
Interesting. That's what I've experienced.
Yeah, when you outlast and you withhold and you're strong enough to make it through those earlier storms, the closer you get to that breakthrough of remembering your true power and your true strength, the more that voice or that part of you will try to stop you. It's like it's self-sabotaging. It wants to make sure that you don't get across that point of no return. Yeah. And you did that. And as soon as you break through the hardest hits you've ever taken and you're just ready to give in and just give up, there's always that breaking point where your sheer will and the spirit guiding you to do so will push you past the severity of the voice enough to where you can get a glimpse of your divinity that's hiding behind the monster that keeps trying to keep you away from it. And you'll get a glimpse of it, and then that'll reassure you, and that'll make you even more convicted and it'll give you more perseverance, it'll give you more focus, but you also know, it's like you get a glimpse behind the curtain just enough to give you a little more to keep going. And then that voice will really start shouting and really start telling you all kinds of complicated narratives, or even just tell you to do something. And you'll want to obey. You'll want to with everything in you. You're just like, I got to do it. But if you just stay focused on that memory that you have of your divine state, or who you really are, your true power, it gives you the strength to outlast that voice a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And if you keep doing that, you'll get bigger and bigger glimpses of who you really are. And then eventually that voice, it'll blow up one last time. It'll cause one huge last upset in that line of thinking, and then it goes quiet because it realizes it lost and it can't keep influencing you.